So I was trying to find ways to give the experience of being in the desert or being in an abandoned home to somebody who's 3,000 miles away. It's cold out. You don't get that soul of the space.
Welcome to Eidos the podcast, where we explore the ways in which ideas take their shape and form through the arts. This podcast is sponsored by Eidos Artworks, publishers of a quarterly journal about art and culture featuring local and international artists. And Notan Artworks, helping clients find artwork for their home or office that inspires serenity in a busy world. And Spokane Falls Community College photography and digital media production programs, preparing students for careers in applied visual arts since 1965. And the Richmond Artist Collective, supporting emerging and mid-career artists locally and nationally, located in the historic Richmond Hotel building in downtown Spokane, Washington. Hi, my name's Ira Gardner, and I'm your host of the Eidos podcast. In this episode, we're going to be looking at installation art. I had the opportunity recently to visit with two installation artists who are being recognized nationally and internationally for their artwork. In the first segment, we will meet artist Linus Riepler, who is based out of Vienna, Austria. Linus will present an installation piece he completed this spring as part of the laboratory art residency here in Spokane, Washington. In the second segment, I will have a conversation with Julie Gautier-Downes, who is a rising star in the art world and perhaps the busiest artist I know. Let's get started.
I'm not so much a movie guy. It's really rather the theater which comes through. So I'm living in Vienna for 12 years, quite long, and Vienna has a very specific culture. There's a lot of theaters culture, so I think this in a way influenced me. My name is Linus Riepler, and I'm from Austria. At the moment I live in Vienna. My installation here it's called a small analog holodeck, and that's basically what it is. I think the holodeck, which many people probably know from Star Trek, so to explain what a holodeck is, it's basically an empty room that the crew members can enter, and whatever they wish to, whatever setting they wish to be in, just appears as a hologram. So it can be any kind of exotic place or historic event or whatever. And I wanted to transfer this into my own visual language, and I'm working a lot with simple mechanics with pulleys and ropes. And so I wanted to translate it into those kind of techniques. I'm not some kind of science fiction nerd or something, but I watched all of those Star Trek series as a child. I enjoyed it a lot, but whatever, yeah. I'm not so much a movie guy. It's really rather the theater which comes through. I mostly do room installations and sculptures. And I see my works as some kind of scenes in different formats. Sometimes they become room-filling installations, sometimes they're just small dioramas and display boxes. And what interests me the most is the combination of working with space and narration. So I like to tell stories or through the space or also through a lot of interactive components. I see my work quite close to theater. Sometimes my work can be compared to theater settings, and I understand the event of an exhibition as a kind of play, like a theater play, where the viewers can become the actors or the audience, and the artwork can become some kind of stage prop. If people enter my holodeck, what I try to do is to lead them into some kind of different reality. So as soon as you're inside, you're somewhere completely else. And then if you use the work in pulling a rope or a handle, then you again create the reality. Like in a kind of forest scene or a city landscape or some kind of more abstract group of people. Who helped me a lot was Joris Hogeboom, my colleague here from the Netherlands, because he's some kind of engineer and architect. He knows a lot about friction and a lot about new technology. The whole work is fixed to the wall with 4 screws. And here there are 2 stands that hold it. And that's it, it's a light construction. And all of the pulleys and everything is fixed with ropes in a very simple way to keep the space around as it is, basically. Working with pulleys, it's always a lot of trial and error. So it was nice to have somebody to discuss those things with, to find out new ideas if I get stuck. Which was new to me, because normally I'm used to work alone. So this was a new thing for me, that I can show it to someone. And then what you can see is the organic process, like I was just starting to build those pulleys, and I actually worked it out while building it up, the mechanical part of the whole work. Then I got a lot of help with there's this one setting which is just a shadow projection, and that was the first time that I used Arduino. Didn't know anything about this technique and learned a lot from my colleagues. Yeah, so as you can see, the construction is quite rough and maybe even a little bit trashy, but I like the thought that it's ugly from the outside but nice from the inside. The process was maybe a bit different than normally. Normally I enjoyed a lot if the artwork can grow in my studio. Like I start with something and it's not completely clear. I mean, I have my concept, I have my idea, but it's growing. And here the working process was a little bit different. It was more planning, I would say. Yeah. And then the installation or installing the artwork just happened within the last 2 weeks probably. Yeah, and before it was more preparation. I grew up on the countryside in Upper Austria, in a very rural area. So there was a lot of nature, a lot of time, not much to do probably. And from an early age on I was interested in art. I guess what influenced me a little bit is what my parents, they bought this abandoned house and started rebuilding it, and maybe that also influenced my work a little bit. Yeah, my education was the classical way. Like after high school, I just entered the art academy in Vienna, and I studied there for 5 years. 2 years in the painting department, the rest in the sculpture department, and then I spent 1 semester in Belgium as an exchange student. It was more or less classical sculpture. I mean, not classical in a kind of old-fashioned way, yeah, but in a contemporary way. I work a lot with memories. I like to recreate memories and places, and objects, but sometimes I also alter them or change them into something else. The viewers can build up their own story. They maybe don't really know what I meant or what I felt, but they can build up their own feelings. I want to engage the audience. I want to create some kind of emotions when a viewer watches my work or enters one of my installations. I think my work is not so much about knowledge or about, I don't know, it's more about feeling something. The buildings I selected the buildings which I show here through an archive that I made, a photographic archive. I was walking around in the town a lot and just took pictures of buildings that I liked. And afterwards I scanned through those photographs, and what caught my interest I just drew and transformed into a sculpture. One of the funniest experiences was, maybe that's not so funny, I don't know. Yeah, what was very unusual to me is like how much stranger people would like to talk to you on the street, like in a shop. Like all of them ask you how you are, what you're doing, like, and there was some kind of misunderstanding sometimes. Like I thought that they really actually want to hear what I was doing or how I am, but it's just a phrase. And so I had to get used to this. There are 3 settings in this work, and one setting are big canvases which show a landscape. It's a specific landscape. It's in Palisades Park, and it's also a specific moment when I was there walking around, and there was some kind of strange doll in the bushes. So I tried to capture that moment. I don't know. I thought more the rough corners of the city, I would say. But then it changed, and after a while I saw how friendly people are, like honestly friendly. And I don't know, I had a lot of nice experiences here. I really like Spokane, I would say. In a way, the work is a little bit site-specific because the measurements came from the place where it's situated. And yeah, the idea was that it's just temporary here. Yeah, and I like this idea of temporary artwork that's not here forever. I mean, for a couple of years I'm working together with a gallery. I'm happy that for a couple of years I can mostly do my art and don't have to do so many things besides that. I have to do side jobs sometimes, but art is still my main topic. I really try to create some kind of experience for the viewers, so that I use different senses at once, so it's not just seeing. Often I use music or even scents. Next for me are 3 days in LA. It's like a holiday because I've never been there. And then I'm gonna go back to Vienna. And then I have an exhibition coming up in Austria, a group show. And then there is another residency in June in Croatia. I think my family is quite okay with me being an artist. I guess in the beginning it was a little bit hard for my parents, but they trusted me early on, I think. And now they can see that I'm still doing this after such a long time, so it's okay for them, I think.
So we're here at the Richmond Artist Collective in downtown Spokane, and we're in the studio of installation artist Julie Gautier-Downes. Did I pronounce that right?
Close.
Close. Could you say it in your French?
Julie Gautier-Downes.
Perfect. And you're also a photographer as well, but today we're really emphasizing talking about installation work. So to begin with, could you just kind of explain your definition of installation art?
Yeah, I think of installation art as kind of a bridge between assemblage and sculpture. So for me, it's about creating a space that resembles something else. that uses objects and then also materials that I construct, so that it kind of has this weird home feeling.
Can you describe what led you into installation art? What were some of the other mediums that you worked with prior to this?
Mm-hmm. I started as a painter. Years ago, I was doing oil painting, and then I started doing photography in high school, and I was just shooting wherever I was, my living situations, the towns that I lived in. I've lived in a lot of different places, and it wasn't until college that I really developed my photography, and I stopped painting completely. And I was using a lot of like old cameras, and it was more about the kind of the soul of the object and trying to bring that out and trying to create like surrogates for spaces that I have lived in. So when I was in graduate school, I was doing photography in the desert in California, going to school in Rhode Island. So I was constantly trying to go and shoot and then come back and just edit for a couple months. And so that time in the studio became really important because that was the more extended time that I had to work. So I was trying to find ways to give the experience of being in the desert or being in an abandoned home to somebody who's 3,000 miles away. It's cold out. You don't get that soul of the space. So I started trying to reconstruct places that I was photographing from memory or from the photographs that I'd bring back. And then I would incorporate the photographs in some way, so either as a mural or as a light box, a projection, just trying to kind of use that as the stage for the objects that I was organizing. And as I did that more, I felt like it was more effective. It helped the audience be able to really walk into a space and
that's actually what I'm sitting here thinking about as you describe it. Is you move beyond photography by inviting the viewer to actually experience that space a little bit. So does photography inform your installation work?
Yeah, photography does. Also just memory. A lot of it is like I think of a person that I've known or a space that I've photographed, and I try to recreate it and try to find that kind of core nugget of what it is that I'm trying to show about that person or that space.
Now, you're one of the busiest artists I know. What are some of the exhibitions that you have going on right now? What are some of the more interesting places you've exhibited?
I have a show up at the Chase right now at City Hall in Spokane. I have 3 installations that are up there. It's called Dislocated Memories, which is a project that I started last year. I got a grant in October to build this large installation. It's an 8x12 room that's a recreation of my childhood bedroom. And so the viewer can really walk in and engage with it. It's kind of a nighttime scene that evokes different things that I was thinking about from my childhood, difficult memories. I just had a solo show in Missouri of some of my photographic work. That was a project called Scattered Remains, which kind of documents ghost towns around the western United States and then some in Europe. And what's another one? I've had shows with the Saranac Art Projects. A couple different installations have been up there in Spokane.
And you're part of the group show here at the Richmond as well.
I am.
And then what are some of the, you're really good at keeping people informed of what you're doing. You send out a newsletter. It seems to me you had some work accepted in England recently, or?
Yeah, I have. I'm working on a collaborative project with an artist in England right now, and I also just had work up in a show in Manchester. A few months ago I had some work in a show in Hungary, the PH21 Gallery, and...
You have some residencies coming up?
I do. I have a residency in Vermont at the Vermont Studio Center in October.
You are traveling a lot this year, and what are some of the challenges that somebody working in the field of installation art faces?
Well, as you can see, I'm not a big buff man. a lot of it is just trying to carry materials, building things. I didn't know how to build walls when I started doing this kind of work, so it's been a steep learning curve. A lot of it is coordinating helpers or sourcing materials. I get really lucky when I go to thrift stores, but I can't always know what I'm going to find. And then when I'm applying to a show that's a long distance away, I have to think about U-Haul trailers or trucks, or how I'm going to reconstruct something in a short time frame. I've had to build 8x8 rooms in a week, and you know, it
do you end up like going to the location and then sourcing the materials locally? So I mean, it's got to be incredibly challenging just thinking about the expense of shipping an installation.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not at the point in my career where I'm able to ship things across the country. Generally, I try to apply within driving distance. Driving distance might be Illinois, but it works out.
Nice. Yeah, speaking of that, I think you were also driving back and forth to Montana recently and over to the Seattle area. And in fact, you just recently acquired a new pickup truck, didn't you?
I did, yep, my new Tacoma.
Yeah, so how does an installation artist, what's that career like in terms of, you're not creating pieces that somebody could easily acquire. How do people consume installation art? How do they relate to it, or what is it that you can, what do you have to do to make a living as an installation artist?
Generally, you have to have a day job of some sort, like most artists. For me, the installation art is so much about the experience, and that's what I get from other installation artists. It's about that interaction. It's about that personal experience for someone and how they're going to engage with the piece. And so that's the most important thing. It's not about the money per se. It's about trying to create some kind of engaging experience that this person's going to take with them.
Your work is, I'll just be blunt, it reminds me of confessional poetry in that it's so autobiographical. It's, I read a recent article about your work. You've been written up in both local publications here, where there's just an essence of sadness that permeates some of the installation work. So as you mentioned earlier, you're not dealing with easy emotions. You're not dealing with easy memories, in fact. What do you want the people that come to your show to take away? What are the takeaways from that for the audience? I'm thinking for you, and what is it for you? What does the process of doing this work do for you?
For me, it's pretty cathartic. I think about times that I've had struggles or different challenges from my family growing up, different family members that had struggles. And I think that unpacking of those experiences helps me to process it and to kind of get past that. And I feel like that's the beauty of art, is that we can draw from our histories, our different experiences, and create something that's relatable to the viewer.
Well, and from that standpoint, would you agree that maybe through the act of composition that you're recreating this image that in some way, even if it's an unhappy image, if it's well composed, it's well put together, there's a wholeness or completeness to it that maybe offers up some sort of closure for that memory?
Yeah, for sure. I feel that way, especially in photography, that the installations have that as well.
Yeah, I think as a photographer, a lot of my early work, up until very recently actually, has been very much based in memory as well. And I think there's just something about, particularly childhood memories, where the child doesn't really have the control over what's happening, but as the artist you do. You have control over every element within this space. And sure. What's been some of the feedback that you get from people that come through one of your exhibits?
It's been positive overall. I think that the beauty of my installations in some ways is that they are so approachable. They're these kind of vernacular spaces, that, you know, even somebody who's never been to an art museum or an art gallery or an art opening can walk in and feel comfortable in the space to some extent and interact and experience those emotions. And they don't have to understand, you know, the history of installation art or painting or sculpture or any of that. They can have their own personal take on it. I had someone, a lot of the time people come in and they say, oh, you know, it reminds me of my grandma's house or the den in my parents' house, or oh, you know, I had that shoe, or, you know, it's a lot of reminiscing goes on in my installations.
That makes me think of just that you raise an awareness that we belong to a culture, or that some people are relating to these objects as elements of culture.
Yeah.
And so there's that connectivity that you're creating for those people that share that same culture.
Yeah. As much as everyone's home feels like their personal take or their own, you know, decorative style or whatever, all of the objects are mass produced, so we all kind of have the same things.
What is your educational background? What role has that played in your work?
It's been really important to me. I went to an art high school in New York City when I was a teenager, and so I was able to have 4 years of really intense foundations and just, you know, painting and drawing and sculpture and photography and really learning the history behind everything. So by the time I got to college, I had already had a lot more experience than a lot of the other students. And I ended up going to UC Santa Cruz, and it was a culture shock. Going from New York City to Santa Cruz, a sleepy little town in the Redwoods, it took a couple years to find my people and my kind of place, and I think that isolation came out in my work.
And then you ended up going back east to RISD, right?
Yeah. So then back into the culture shock of being on the East Coast and more fast-paced, more elite kind of culture.
What did you take away from RISD? Rhode Island School of Design, one of the top art colleges in the country.
I think I really just I learned that it didn't matter if people got what I was doing and that I needed to just keep doing it. And the more that I kind of showed my own weird, quirky sense of spaces, the more people got a kick out of it and found it interesting.
Well, with all the travel you've done, it seems appropriate to listen to airplanes in the background today. What are the greatest challenges that you're facing as you go through making a particular installation? I mean, what's that process like for you? Do you find there's moments of doubt, moments of frustration, or is it just, you know, what's your process?
Yeah, it really depends on the timeline. I prefer to have more time to collect materials to build the space. I try to kind of imagine, you know, who the person is first and what the space needs to look like, how many walls I need to build, if I'm going to paint them or do wallpaper or wood paneling. And then from that kind of planning stage, I start looking for materials. So I'll go to different thrift stores. Spokane's a wonderful place for thrift stores. There's so many. I've never lived somewhere with so many thrift stores. So I'll go and I'll start looking for furniture and objects and, you know, digging around for debris and dust that I can integrate into the piece. So it's a very organic process. I work very intuitively.
I hate that word intuitively, but it is so common in art. I work intuitively, yes, I know. But I do think Spokane is it's like a place that embraces every time frame, because right outside the studio, you will see every make of vehicle that's driven every day, from something from the 70s to the 50s to the very newest. It's just a plethora of cultural artifacts and time periods that I find incredibly interesting. And I think it's one of the things that's made Spokane really maturing as an art scene a little bit. What's that art scene been like here recently for you?
I think it's an exciting time to live in Spokane, from what I've heard. There's a lot of cool galleries. There's a lot of opportunity for artists. I set out, when I try to get a show somewhere, I make a list of galleries I'm going to approach. I write a cover letter, decide which work I'm trying to promote, or I'll give, some photography and some installations. And then I just send it out to different galleries, and you'd be amazed how many say yes.
It's been very impressive over the last couple of years. You've only been in Spokane, what, 2 years? 3?
Almost 2 years.
2 years.
September.
You've been really plugged into the community, and I congratulate you on that.
Thank you.
Very, very impressive and inspirational for someone to watch. So, thank you so very much. It's been a pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Eidos the Podcast, where we've looked at installation artists. I think the takeaways for me have been the ideas about how memory affects artwork, and how the artist can reconstruct images and invite the viewer into those spaces, into that artwork, in a way that's just so much more tactile than a painting or a photograph. And this idea that art is the recomposing of those memories, and that we can build some harmony and equilibrium through our artwork, through that composition process. It's been a real pleasure to meet both Linus and to talk with Julie, and I hope you'll join us again. In the meantime, check out our website at www.eidosartworks.com, and we'll look for you again real soon.